Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Mary Olson-Menzel. I'll tell you all about Mary in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we extend toward others. And when you do it from a leadership position, as you will definitely discover that Mary Olson-Menzel is, you do it for a common cause to bring people together. Welcome, Mary Olson-Menzel.
Hello, John. It's good to be here.
Great. I want to tell folks all about you. Mary Olson-Menzel has over 30 years of leadership experience across media, tech, healthcare, and other industries. She's the founder and CEO of MVP Executive Development, a national leadership coaching and firm. She's based in New York City, and she has a brand new book, which is called What Lights You Up? And we're going to focus on that today. So, Mary, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Good to be here, John.
Great. Now, in your book, which I find to be a gem, you talk about the light, the subject of light as a noun. What is light in this context? What does it mean to you, Mary?
So to me, John, light means charisma. It's that it quality. It's the feeling that you get when somebody walks into a room and everybody stares, right? It's that energy that somebody brings to their work and to their life.
Oh, cool. I love that. That it factor. I think somebody called Mary Pickford was once called the it girl over 100 years ago. Isn't that amazing? So now you are not only your experienced coach, but you have you're a career coach. And I think you're working in executive recruitment. If I'm wrong, correct me. So you've seen more than one or two resumes. And so in your new book, What Lights You Up? Why there are many career books. What is the differentiating factor? And I believe there is in this book, What Lights You Up?
Well, What Lights You Up is based on a proven methodology that I created about 10 years ago that is a 10-step program to help somebody pivot into a job or a career that they love. And what makes this book special in my mind, many things, John, but what makes it really special is that I take readers on a journey that I take my clients through step by step in order to tap into what is it that lights them up, what gives them joy, how do they tell their authentic story, how do they prepare their job search toolbox with their resume, their LinkedIn presence, their social media presence, and then how to interview, how to negotiate the job, how to get the job. And then I take it a step further and we really go into a lot of leadership. How do you thrive once you're in the job?
I like that because so many career focus is just getting there and you're taking it to the next step. And you said something which is near and dear to my heart because I do pro bono coaching with people who are military vets who transition to the civilian sector. And we always work on their story. Why is story so important?
Story is the key to connection. Right? To the human connection. Storytelling has been around since the Stone Ages. And if you can tell an authentic story about your life and your career trajectory and how you got to where you are today, you're 9 times out of 10 going to be able to connect on a much deeper level with the person that's interviewing you.
Okay. Now let's talk about the story because I think people know about it, but let's just say the traditional thing, and I know this happens very often with women, childbearing, whatever, they take quote time off from the work, but 10 times more work. You're a mother of 3, so you know this. So there's a quote gap. What are some tips for bridging that story or enhancing that story, Mary?
Great question, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, John. And the one of the silver linings of COVID is that it made a gap more acceptable, right? And I think that people and their iterations around their careers and around their jobs nowadays looks very different because some people had to take time off to take care of kids or to take care of elder care. And as long as you can explain that gap in a meaningful way, employers are much open to actually considering you regardless of the gap or not, if you've got the right reasons for taking that gap.
Right. Would you do the explanation for your gap right on your resume, or how would you broach that? So
there's so many creative ways that you can do it, not getting too creative, but I mean, on your resume, it's hard to, provide for the gap. You can just put almost like a job description, right? I have a client who lives down the street from me, actually, who took that gap and called herself the Collins head of operations. And she was literally, logistics, chief bottle washer and cook, organizer, chief of operations of her household. And so there are creative ways to do it in a way that will make somebody smile or make somebody laugh.
That's great. I love that. So now, germane to your book, there are 3 Ps. Can you tell us what they are? So
Yes. So one of the keys to a really successful career search is turning your job search inside out, right? Not just looking on LinkedIn, looking on Indeed, and trying to see what openings are out there. It's becoming very intentional about where you're looking and where you want to go. So I like to call this list the 3 Ps. The first P is your prospects. It is your usual prospects. So, John, for you or I, we're both executive coaches. That would be going into, a leadership and organizational development function within a company, right? That's your usual prospect, right? But then there are the pivots, which are a lot more fun. When you're looking to make a change, those pivots can be, taking that into, like, I pivoted, right? So one of my pivots was from recruiting into executive coaching. So that's kind of a career pivot. So you want to look at companies where you could actually do a pivot. And then my very favorite is the passions. And that is, where can you take what you love to do and what truly lights you up and apply it into a structure where you can earn money and do it as a living?
That's great. I want to dwell on the second P, which is the pivot. We understand it, but it can be frightening because, let's say, well, for you, and perhaps what you've learned, you went from recruiting to executive coach, but what's going through? So how should we someone wants to make that commitment. And they present themselves to a potential, or through a resume or whatever. And they'll say, well, yes, I was doing this, but now I want to do X. And there's going to be some resistance. So what advice do you have for that, Mary? So
to be open, right? To be open to conversations. I tell my clients, say yes to every conversation. Even if it doesn't feel like it might be a fit, you have no idea where it will lead to. But, there are beautiful pivots that can happen very, very organically if you're open to conversations, right? And open to the idea that you might not be able to check all the boxes of that position description. But if you have the right energy, the right attitude, there are many hiring managers who will take a chance on you and teach you the skills.
Okay. Well, that's a key point, because let's just say that you are, what happens typically in management, of course, and it's the old, you begin in finance and you end up as the CEO. That was the easy old path.
Yeah.
But what if someone is in something like logistics and I really want to go to marketing? Are there elements from the career in logistics that might be applied to marketing? And should an employee, a candidate, look for links in that new job? So
definitely following the links, right? I mean, that's part of being open-minded and having conversations. But when you really want to pivot from something like logistics into marketing, you almost want to become a student of marketing in the company that you are at right now, and start to see if there are ways to immerse yourself in learning more about the marketing department, in wrapping, where are the common threads between logistics and marketing. These days, there are a lot, if you look at Amazon and places like that,
Great. Now that you mentioned the third P is passion, we hear lots of that, and our colleague Elena Love has created a career on helping people, and she's got a world class assessment on passion and linking it. So, what do you advise people about passion? Do you come on strong? Do you soft sell it, or what's the deal with that? How do we convey it, Mary? So.
Well, passion is, in my mind, when we're talking about the three Ps, at least, John, passion is, how can you actually tap into what it is that you are truly passionate about, what lights you up, and apply it to a career, right? So that's when that target list becomes very, very important. I can give you an example. There was a woman I worked with who had worked for a media company, and her passion was travel. And so we went down, the 10-step pivot program, and we made a list of all the travel related companies in her, town where she lived and worked. We were very lucky because there was a very big one in this town. And we ended up, through coaching of how to tell your story, how to show, what your value is into this, we ended up getting her a job doing what she loves in a travel related company. So suddenly her skill sets and her passions were, creating this really, really magical place. And she's been there. We worked together 5 years ago and she's still there.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And the last 5 years have been quite different and very challenging in the travel industry. So
Yeah.
now let's say you've gotten the job. Now, a seminal book on taking a new job, or at least from a leadership position, is Michael Watkins' book, The First 90 Days. And the lesson that I have taken from that book is the first thing you do, the second thing you do, and the third thing you do is learn. Would you advise the same advice for someone moving into middle management or for a new company? What's your perspective on that, Mary? So.
Absolutely, John. That's a really good book, and I would highly recommend to anybody in a new role picks up that book. But really, truly, it is now, you've become a student of the industry. You've kind of gotten yourself this job. Now you become a student of the company, right? And you really do. You learn. You soak up everything that you can. You ask your leader to sit in on meetings so that you can just learn through osmosis, through hearing other people talk, but also really making an effort to not only understand the organization, but understand the people in it. So I suggest you meet with as many people as you can in those first 30, 60, especially 90 days. Your peers, your boss's boss, you're having one-on-ones and learning what it is that drives them, what it is that helps them, what it is that you can do to help them do their jobs better. Collaboration.
Good. Well, speaking of collaboration, and we're still, you emphasize, and it's something I've talked about, written about, taught, and I know you're expert in this. We use the term leadership at every level. So if I'm a new person, entry level management per se, how do I demonstrate my leadership chops? So.
Yes. And I love this question, John, because even if you're not leading people, you can become a leader in the organization, right? And you have to get rid of that mindset that you have to be leading people in order to be a leader. I just got off the phone with a client who is the head of brand at a company, and he is not leading anyone in his group per se, that he has no direct reports, but he is leading the charge as this company shifts the way that they look at the brand, and that's huge. And as a young person, I'll just take it a little step further. You look for opportunities to get involved.
Great. I think perhaps an operative word on that is to leverage your influence, which is based on your credibility. What would be your perspective on that, Mary? So
we could ask Mitchell Levy that, right? But no, I think
Mitchell is a colleague of ours, and
yes,
entrepreneur and multi-book publisher and all kinds of stuff. So anyway.
Yes, we have so many special colleagues. No, I think it's really about building trust. right? And that is the credibility part. So, becoming a student, once again, of the company, soaking up as much as you can, sitting in on those meetings, but also looking for ways to help, looking for ways to grow within that own organization. It's really, really key for young people, especially, to kind of look outside of their purview of what their position description is and say, how can I help my boss be the
Right.
best they can be? Right.
Yeah, I call that leading up, and finding ways to do that. Now let's getting back to there can be some resistance. I mean, I'm sorry, feeling that do I really have what it takes to lead, or if I'm new in my organization, and so how do I get over that first step? I like the fact that you use the word help. So delve into that if you would, Mary. So.
Yes, yes. It's baby steps, John, right? I mean, one day at
I'm
a
good at that now, and going backwards too.
exactly. But it's one day at a time, right? If you're young and you're new in your profession, that question, how can I help? And going to your boss and going to, your peers and saying, what can I do to make your job easier? What can I do to make sure that both of our departments are thriving? That simple question can give you so many deep answers. You'd be surprised.
Okay. Now, we were talking about a relationship between an employee and a supervisor, at whatever level. But what about peer-to-peer leadership or peer-to-peer helping? How do we do that, Mary? So.
Right, right. That's in the bucket of collaboration. And that's what I'm saying. You can't just be looking up and down, right? You need to be looking across at all of the departments that you touch and looking for ways to really truly take on initiatives together. And that will create trust and create bonding and then create growth.
Right. Now, and I know your book delves into this. So it's, what if your dream job isn't so dreamy after all? So what do you advise, Mary? So.
Well, I think it's, goes back to that being open, right? We've all had, well, many of us have had pivots throughout our career. I've had quite a few myself. I've gone from television reporter to recruiter, right? And that is a perfect example because my life wanted, I thought I was going to be this television reporter. And what I realized is it wasn't the dream job that I had envisioned it out of undergrad. And so, I was having a conversation with a recruiting firm about a different job. And they said, well, we think you have potential to take your interviewing skills into a different direction and become a recruiter. Well, if I hadn't been open-minded about that and willing to have that conversation, I might still be reporting the news somewhere. But instead, I'm sitting here with you.
Oh, that's great. I can see you as a reporter. I had forgotten that with your background. And because you're always so poised on camera there.
Yeah.
So anyway, now, but okay, so that is a good, valid advice. But so let's say if, part of that dream goes wrong because I'm in the quote wrong company, or this is not my culture. What do you advise?
That's an interesting one too, because I'm sure you do too. We advise so many executives around this because, an interview can take you so far. You get into the company and then the realities of what it really is sometimes don't match up with what you learned in the interview process. And I think that if you're going to have to make a pivot like that, you become very, very diligent about the questions that you ask during the interview process. And truly, some people think, oh gosh, I've had 12 interviews. Is that too much? Well, it's not if you're gathering information and data around what the culture actually is within the organization. So asking a lot of questions the second time around and making sure that you're not making the same mistake twice, learning from those mistakes.
Right. Now we're in an era now of, in some ways we're always in this, certainly in the 21st century, an era of uncertainty. And our colleague Adrian Gostick just today posted an article in Forbes.com about uncertainty and how to navigate it. Part of that uncertainty has a blowback, or if it's realized, it comes into layoffs. So if I'm hearing about a layoff, a rumor, what do you advise, Mary? So
it's funny, John, I just spoke about this the other day, and
I wish you hadn't, because I wish the topic didn't exist, but
I
you're a
know,
good person to speak to. So.
it's staggering. It is staggering numbers right now. And so, the whole idea about a layoff or a looming layoff is to be prepared for that layoff well before it happens, to keep your network strong. I mean, doing things on LinkedIn, keeping your network strong, talking to different people about what's happening out there in the industry, making sure your resume is up to date, making sure that regardless of, even when you're happy in a job, you want to be prepared for the unexpected.
Right. I think that's very important because, virtually all of my career, 40 years or more, but don't tell anybody it's that many years. I've been an independent, and so I've always had to be au courant. But I noticed so many times working with organizations, working with employees, I don't even know if they had a resume, and they weren't self-managing. And we've been through this era where you really have to manage your career. So what are some tips on that other than resume, Mary? So
other than resume, I mean, keeping those lines of communication open with recruiters, understanding what is happening in the industry that you work in. You're going to be able to, if you're watching what's happening in the industry, you're going to be able to see things potentially coming before they do. But also keeping those, the growth happening, right? I mean, looking for ways to educate yourself within your own organization, looking for ways to AI is so hot. You're an expert in it more than I am. And but I mean, looking for ways, take a class in AI, take a class for our logistics person who wants to go into marketing, soak up as much, taking classes and using the resources that your company actually provides for you so that you're staying current and abreast of things as they happen.
Great. Now, if I do lose my job through a layoff, and what invariably happens, even if it's not, quote, your fault, because it's a downsizing and they get rid of your department, people get down on themselves. So what advice do you give them, Mary?
Well, I mean, this is where the grace comes in, right, John? I mean, anyone who's been hit by a layoff, expected or unexpected, it's a grieving process. And there's the shock factor that happens. I mean, we're all human, right? And it's a blow to our ego. It's a blow to our bank account. There's many factors that go into it. But if you can allow yourself to feel the feelings, have the grace for yourself, the grace that you would give to other people, right? There's a process where sometimes people get laid off and they say, Mary, I want to hire you tomorrow. And I said, you know what? You actually need to take a vacation if you can afford it. Take a week, clear your head, feel the emotions, process the emotions. And then when you're ready to get started, we can start digging into what's next for you.
I love that concept. First of all, showing grace to oneself is something that we don't do enough of. The grace is that gift which comes to us, and we do with it what we will, but we may share it with others, but we're hard on ourselves. And the other thing is, I love what you just said about, in a moment of crisis, take a breath, take a vacation. You weren't being flippant about that, but gather your emotional quotient together, and that's very powerful. So basically calm down and then focus. Good advice on that. So now you mentioned this, and I wish it weren't true, about looking for their uncertainty and relating unemployment, unexpected unemployment, layoffs, the whole thing. So that's why your book, What Lights You Up, will be a good resource. So what's one thing you like to share? What can people gain the most from this book, Mary?
John, so many things.
That's That's okay. It doesn't have to be one.
I think the one thing that people can gain the most, and this is super, super important, is to give them the confidence to follow their dreams again, because a layoff or any gap, right, in employment can mess with your confidence. And so this book will give you step-by-step guidance into how to tap into that confidence again and regain some of that inner strength that you need to go through the process.
I'm so glad you mentioned the topic of confidence, because things are floating around and we're rocking and rolling, and then we get hit with a setback, and then we kind of get rocked back. And pulling out of it, we need to mine our resources. Is there one thing or two things that, if to regain confidence, what do you advise, Mary?
I mean, it's really truly leaning into your support system, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. And I just think, as we focus on grace, right, and what it means, when you're going through the roadblocks and the ups and downs in life, you need to actually be okay asking for help, but really be okay leaning into that support system, because 9 times out of 10, people want to help you.
That's a good optimistic thing, and building on your network. Now, Mary, we could go for another couple of hours, but I know you have a very busy schedule. And as you know, I ask every guest a story about grace. Do you have one you'd wish to share with us?
Wow. I mean, I have so many, but I'm going to share the most recent one, which you were a part of, John. I recently lost my mom, and I was simultaneously running my business, finishing my book, and flying back and forth from New York to Chicago, what almost felt like every week, to spend time with her and to be with her. And I'll never forget you and several of our colleagues. We were on a Zoom and we were talking about vulnerability, and you all allowed me to be vulnerable and understood exactly, what I was going through and where, what it takes to kind of hold all those balls in the air and still do it with a smile and some tears. But I think, that situation between our colleagues at the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, but also my colleagues at MVP, my team at Wiley, my team at Book Highlight, all of those people, and my husband and my immediate family, they all really, really allowed me to have the space and the grace to grieve and to get through what I needed to get through in order to move forward.
Well, what you just told us, I think, is the classic illustration of what you had said previously. Rely on your network. And this wasn't a business thing. This was an emotional, a personal issue. So that's a wonderful and beautiful story about grace. So thank you. Mary, where can people find the book? I know it's everywhere, but where can they find you too?
Yes. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn for sure, but Mary Olson-Menzel, all one word, MaryOlsonMenzel.com is where you can find the book and all the outlets. And really, really exciting stuff. Starting this week, if you pre-order the book, you will get a free downloadable workbook to get started on what lights you up now before you even get the book.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I know your book has got these resources to it, in addition to just the book itself. It's an active, not only can you read it, but you can become, it's an interactive way of engaging yourself and your brain and focusing on what's next for you. So Mary Olson-Menzel, it has been such an honor to speak to you today. And with that, my friend, we will go out.